You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Hello and welcome to Force 13 Live. Our coverage is now shifting predominantly to the developing Hurricane Orlene, which is approaching the coast of western Mexico. On the bottom left hand side there you can see the storm, and on our left hand panels you can see both storms that we've been covering in recent days, the remnants of Hurricane Ian, which can still be quite clearly traced. The center of that is pretty much on the northern border of North Carolina entering Virginia, but we're mainly focusing our coverage now on Hurricane Orlene, where hurricane warnings are in effect for parts of the coast of Mexico. And at 12 o'clock they've just released a new advisory. No changes since the last advisory, but for those who weren't aware, it is now a hurricane category 1 with winds of 75 miles per hour and a central pressure of 989. Reminder of the warnings: a hurricane warning now in effect for Islas Marias, the tropical storm warning in effect for the coast of mainland Mexico from Playa Perula to San Blas, and a hurricane watch for the coast of mainland Mexico from San Blas to Bahia Tempehuaya, and a tropical storm watch for the coast of mainland Mexico from Manzanillo to Playa Perula. So we are expecting hurricane conditions to occur somewhere along possibly the coastline, but definitely for the small islands that are off the coast there, known as the Marias Islands. As we look right now, we've got a webcam live in Puerto Vallarta right now, and as you can see, a decent view looking out to sea there. A few people out still at this time. That location I think is under... I think it's just about still the hold on a minute. I think they're in the tropical storm warning actually, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Yeah, they're under the tropical storm warning, so they're expecting tropical storm force winds soon with strong winds and higher gusts. Of course, this storm won't really be a storm surge threat very much, but it will pack a bit of a punch. Category 1 right now, but my name is Nathan Foy here in the studio once again, and we're here covering all the storms as they strike land areas. And my goodness, we're in a very busy period of tracking storms right now, aren't we? Where we had Hurricane Fiona a few weeks ago, followed on its heels, hot on its heels, by Typhoon Noru, and straight after that we had, of course, Hurricane Ian, which we are still, well, some areas are reeling from, and we'll have some footage from that over the next 3 hours that we're here on the air, as well as our main feature right now, Hurricane Orlene, which has sparked some more hurricane warnings. We're just going to sort something out here and to allow someone else into our room, but right now I am predominantly joined by our fan favorite Mexican correspondent Cesar Gamez, who joins us from Guadalajara in Jalisco, which is the same state that could be impacted by this storm's landfall. And you're in a 3% chance of tropical storm conditions right now, Cesar. Are you concerned?
Well, 3%, it's something. Not really concerned, but of course, it feels kind of weird, right? It has been a lot of times since I've been under a tropical cyclone warning. Last time was Hurricane Hannah back in Monterey. Before that was in 2010. So it's not usual for me, but well, it's interesting. Of course, some rain bands are going to cause some thunderstorm activity, some rains, possibly some flooding in Guadalajara, because it's a place that usually gets flooded quite easily as well. So
Yep.
indeed, it's something that Well, everyone should be concerned. Despite the only 3%, the rain is going to be the predominant risk, at least in my HQ, but in the coastal parts of Mexico, in the western coast, the potential of having actually tropical storm conditions, at least, uh, it's the I think it's the main concern right now due to Orlene's proximity as it approaches to the western coast of Mexico, and as well, it gets stronger.
As well as that, we of course are still looking at the aftermath of what we saw from Hurricane Ian, and I'll ask you for your thoughts in a moment, Cesar. It is still going, the remnants of the storm, with a few little flood watches that are in effect for parts of North Carolina and West Virginia. But here's another video taking a look at the extent of the damage in some of these locations in Florida when Hurricane Ian blew through here and has absolutely ravaged this community of, I assume those are mobile homes, but you can see there really crazy damages and some pretty substantial structures there, quite visible on that imagery. These are lives and livelihoods that have been completely ruined by this storm over the last few days. And I think that might, I'm not sure if that is Fort Myers Beach, but there is a viewpoint. Looks like it might be. And extreme damage over that whole area. So, yeah, that is Fort Myers Beach. So, incredible damage that has occurred, particularly for that area after Hurricane Ian. And no doubt we're going to be seeing a lot more pictures like this. A lot of emergency vehicles there and people who are part of the recovery effort, which is going to be ongoing for an extremely long time in this part of Florida, and that will go on for probably months. But once again, I don't think these images will ever lose their meaning or their importance as we look back at what those damages were across Florida in the last few days. That was from Hurricane Ian, which made a strong Category 4 landfall in southwestern Florida on Wednesday just past, and moved in through to the western Atlantic and then delivered some significant surge impacts to the coast of South Carolina and North Carolina as well, with surge and a lot of rainfall and flooding over large parts of Florida as well. So Ian's remnants continue on, and they are still going with a circulation in the northern part of North Carolina. But as we've said before, our attention now turns to Orlene. But just before we do that, we are also joined by, of course we had Cesar there, but we have David and Marlene. I just want to know if you have any thoughts now that we've long past it, looking back at Ian and its legacy.
That is just absolutely devastating. It's going to be in the ranks of like Katrina and Harvey, and probably one of the top 5 damages alone.
I mean, this was a truly, I think we can say, this was truly a monstrous disaster that occurred in Florida. I mean, I just saw a tweet on the before and after images of Fort Myers, and I mean, this storm literally has wiped out towns away, and I mean, there's no other words to describe this storm other than disasters and just plain, just plain out monstrous, I guess.
Well, it's a historic storm for sure, and practically, and I don't think it's an overstatement, the worst Florida disaster since Andrew of 1992. I don't think Irma will. It's closer to that disaster that Ian just. Oh
I
well,
agree.
Ian. Sorry, caused, because this is really. It's just difficult to describe it with words, because vanished everything in just minutes and hours. The flooding, the storm surge, more than 6 feet, and people climbing on trees on the top of their houses, losing everything. It's something that really don't we don't see a lot. And Ian's passing was completely monstrous. We've seen a lot of comparisons with Hurricane Charlie, with the size of both storms, with the movement of both storms, and the main reason of why we've seen this kind of disasters, the forward speed of Ian was really slow when it made landfall in Florida. Uh,
Hmm.
like less than how about 12, 10 miles per hour only, and Charlie was moving almost the triple of that. Charlie was a small hurricane. Ian was the double or almost the triple of the size of Charlie. And well, those combined factors contribute to this kind of disaster. And the estimated damages are almost 50 billion of damages, would easily makes it one of the top 10 costliest hurricanes ever in the northern Atlantic and worldwide, of course. And possibly it's going to keep increasing as also the damages in the Carolinas um, get revealed. But so far, Florida um, has experienced one of the worst or the worst natural disaster in their recent history, for sure.
So we're just looking at a few more shots here from the impacts of Hurricane Ian from above and on the ground, and a remarkable disaster that has turned out to be, and an addition once again to this hot streak of disastrous hurricanes to affect the United States in recent years. It's one every year at the moment, apart from maybe 2019 when Dorian didn't quite arrive in Florida, of course, but it did still go on through the Carolinas. But in every other year since 2017, it's been a big disaster year for the United States. But that's something that we'll pick up on once in a while. Oh, of course, random reminds me of Imelda in 2019 as well, of course. A weaker storm, but extremely disastrous in terms of flooding, and one that ought to be remembered as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And of course, you'll remember that, of course, David, being in Texas, in Houston area.
Yeah, it was. I mean, to put it simply, the wind wasn't a problem, but I do remember uh, waking up with school being canceled, and then going outside to take my dog out, and then I just see like the main street that was covered that went to the downtown, just being completely flooded.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's another one of those storms that I won't forget, but I think we should move on to.
All right, yeah, we're looking at this viewpoint here from Puerto Vallarta right now. And this is on the south side of the city, I believe, looking towards the southwest, towards that big cape on the southern side of the city. The is it Banderas Bay, Bay of Banderas or Banderas? And this area is under a tropical storm warning right now ahead of Hurricane Orlene, which is our main tracking focus at this point. It became a hurricane earlier today with winds of 75 miles per hour and is still potentially developing. Look back at some of the very picturesque looking or photogenic storm appearing on the true color imagery. The eye popping out there, a rather small one by the looks of things, and perhaps some more strengthening on the way. What do we think?
Definitely strengthening. I think it's close to Cat 2.
I don't think so yet, but it's definitely having some packing intensity. It's looking quite good, and it's a small cyclone as well. So this will help the cyclone to gain strength more easily, but also it makes it more vulnerable to some fluctuations on its intensity. I'm not sure if it's a category 2 yet because it has been recently upgraded to a category 1, but definitely it is a strengthening hurricane looking really beautiful, as Nathan said. But well, category 2 it cannot be ruled out. Actually, it's a really good possibility, judging by the sea surface temperatures. There's no wind shear yet. Sorry, on Orlene's position. Of course, the wind shear and the sea surface temperatures are going to get worse by tomorrow, possibly in the morning or in the afternoon. But yet it has the conditions and it has time to gain some intensity. So the storm surge is going to be the main danger right now, I guess.
Now, when we look at it on the infrared satellite imagery, the eye doesn't look as good there. It looks like there's a significant slot underneath it. Whether that's a dry slot or not is open to interpretation. But the eye itself is located on the southeastern side of a big burst of convection on the northwest there. Cloud tops, though, were decently going up into perhaps the minus 80s, maybe in one or two areas. But decent cloud tops, and we were looking at that webcam again from Puerto Vallarta not long ago, and conditions still mostly sunny there, but cloud cover is starting to come in, and you can see here, and you saw on that true color imagery there, you see that quite clearly, that some high level cloud is coming in through the area, and some of the lower level stuff is not too far behind as we look back at that visible imagery. But overall, the storm is looking decent. But when you recheck that infrared, it doesn't look like it's rapidly intensifying or anything like that, or even strengthening very much yet, although perhaps a little bit. I believe, or at least I was told before we went on the air, that Recon might be in the storm or around the storm during this event.
En route.
They're en route?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll have information on that as soon as they arrive, or whenever we get any news. We'll check some more imagery of the storm from some of our other viewers shortly. We have lovely satellite views from various different sources. Some of these are really excellent. Great ways of being able to see how the storm has been progressing in real time. And here is one shot we can look at right now. So there is the storm. As you can see quite easily, a really close-up view of what it's looking like near the center. So as we were pointing out, it doesn't look quite as good on the infrared as it does on the visible, but you can see how that has progressed throughout the course of this morning. Convection has been really blowing up on the northern side, and the eye has slowly been starting to appear, and just little fits and starts with it becoming more visible. But it does look like it's wrapping around the southern side a little bit better in those later frames. But I'm still wondering what's going on that southern side. I think, to be honest, it is just a moat, because that convective burst here has been blowing up all on the southern side as an actual band rather than the central core of the storm. Just to relate it to how close it is to land, well, there you can see some of those areas. Puerto Vallarta is here. Some of the other locations further down, smaller towns. Manzanillo, for instance, that is off the map on the right hand side. I'm just looking for some more places that I can pop on the map. I can't quite see where it is underneath all of those clouds, but Correas is, I think, somewhere around maybe here. It might be a little bit further west. And there's another place, some smaller locations, Tomatlan, which is somewhere close to here, I think, and or maybe a bit further north, and El Tuito, which is around here, up to Boca de Tomatlan, which is there, not far from Puerto Vallarta. So cloud cover increasing in that area. Let's just check infrared on this viewer as well. Not great when you look at it there. Still needs improvement. And just switch it to the other version. I don't know what's going on with that one. We'll
Ooh.
yeah, it's just the satellite, I think. And the water vapor, which you can often check. Water vapor is usually helpful in determining a storm structure. You can sometimes see it a little bit better than you can on the other infrared levels. But the eye is gradually getting further embedded into the convection, so I think it is on the whole starting to intensify a little bit. You can send us your comments and questions live into the studio. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and there's quite a few going on right now. Sandy says, if you guys had to estimate this, how much damage did Ian do in Florida alone? I've no idea.
Damages about monetary value,
Yeah.
or
I mean, it is going to be extraordinarily high and very.
It's going to be in the
Absolutely.
billions
Of
easily.
course. Tens
Well,
of billions.
yeah. Yeah, at least far more than tens of billions, but yeah.
Avalon says, hello, and are these storms related to the sun's recent activity? Well, you know, I've been not closely researching it, but I do wonder if the solar cycles have an impact on storm activity. There are some loose correlations between activity and that, but I don't think it's a strong one. So generally, I think the sun might only be a small part factor, but the most of the what makes all this happen is very warm sea surface temperatures. I don't know, maybe those are influenced by the sun. I don't know enough about the climatology part of it all. But I suspect that we've had strange tracks, such as Ian, due to, I think it all stemmed from the Modoki La Nina, in my opinion.
What it's interesting about the tropical cyclones is that recently we've seen a tendency that tropical cyclones rapidly intensify by the night hours where there's no sun or where is the sunset. I don't know if actually plays a factor as well.
There is an explanation for that, although I can't remember exactly what it is because, once again, I'm not really on the climatological side of things. But that has been explained before. Diurnal maximums and all that stuff, but I don't know the specifics. A comment there, any new invest in the Eastern Pacific besides the hurricane? Well, yes, actually. There's another disturbance to the southwest of Orlene. It's been looking interesting. In fact, let me just get back to the full disk imagery and you'll be able to see it. They're sort of close enough to be interacting with each other. You can see Hurricane Orlene clearly, and this bit of convection here to the southwest, which National Hurricane Center has marked. Force 13, I think, gave it 20%. National Hurricane Center is currently giving it, let me just check here, 40% actually in the next 5 days. So 40% on that. And this here is Orlene, marked with a big O. Might just look like I'm drawing a circle there. Oh well. Orlene. And 40% there. So I don't know if 40% about that. I think that's a little bit too optimistic. But what's going to happen is that this storm will follow Orlene basically and make a track that way as Orlene pushes through here. Orlene will quickly die off over the Mexican inland regions there, more towards the desert areas as a matter of fact. So I don't think it will really make it into the United States. But that 40% behind it will pretty much follow in its footsteps. And also models as depicting another system over here on the bottom right that could form and move up here, also following in Orlene's footsteps in a different direction, and it's going to become a big mess, I think, in the next 7 days. I personally don't think that either of these two other storms or systems will form, and it will be just Orlene for the foreseeable future.
Well, we'll see, because usually October storms in the Eastern Pacific get really intense, and
Not
actually
always.
tend to. Well, that's true. Not always. But it's a certain
Wasn't
tendency.
Patricia an October storm?
Of course. Yeah, Patricia
Yeah,
was
but
in October. What about
it was
Linda? Was
like
that October or was it September?
was September storm, Linda. Rick was in October.
Rick,
Kenna
yes.
was September.
I think so.
I think Kenna.
Pauline, October,
Orlene, October.
I think.
Well, no, Orlene formed in September 29th, September 30th, so it should be considered like a September-ish cyclone.
I don't know.
I don't.
Let's get
Kenna
some more
was an
comments.
October storm as well. Yeah.
All right. Grammarly Worshipper says, do you think Ian will reform off the mid-Atlantic coast? I am pleased to say there is an extremely minute chance of that happening, that it may as well be zero. Right? Are we all in agreement
Yeah,
with that?
I agree that
actually-
Nathan will not form again. No.
Who said actually?
I was just joking.
Oh, good. Of course, there is going to be a likely new Atlantic storm that will form near the Cape Verde Islands and could glance past those islands to the north and probably stay well out to, will stay well out to sea, and probably, in fact, models have trended downwards on that, but we'll check the models later. That won't be a threat to the western part of the Atlantic. Vert says,
No,
did
but
you
late in the models do show something hitting the Yucatan.
long
But
range?
that's like extreme long range.
Very long range, and earlier ensembles were suggesting that some ensembles were suggesting that would enter the Gulf, but I think that's trending southwards, and it may not happen at all, so that's a very long way out. But Vert says, did you see the link I posted with footage I recorded from the worst of Hurricane Ian? I'm sure we've got it somewhere. I've just not had the chance to look through it, honestly. In terms of recuperation and all of that, I've not been able to catch up with anything since Ian, and I don't expect that I'll be able to catch up with anything until tomorrow, and into Monday even. But after that, we're certainly going to be doing a lot more stuff here at Force 13 in terms of shifting our focus. We do a lot of other things besides tropical storm tracking. We have animations, and the animation, we've had a lot of animators who have produced content that's waiting to be published. Of course, we don't want to do it around major storms, so there's a bit of backlog there for those who enjoy watching our visualizations, but also plenty of other stuff that I imagine is going to be coming up soon as well. But you can join our community on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13, for tropical weather chat at all hours and all around the world. And we'll also have regular updates on our channel. I keep saying that there's a tropical weather bulletin this night, but last 2 nights it ended up not happening. I promise we'll have one tonight, okay? There'll definitely be a tropical weather bulletin tonight. And I'm just trying to catch up to some more of those comments because there's a lot of interesting ones. And the next one was, is that just a clump of thunderstorms near Orlene, or is it an invest area? I assume, I don't know which one you were talking about there. I'm guessing you're talking about the actual invest, which is an actual invest, and we saw NHC 40%. Have you heard about the protests in Cuba? They still don't have power, says II. And if that's true, then that's staggering, because that's what, how long? A week now since Ian pummeled Western Cuba, and it's not like the whole of Cuba got the storm. It's only half of the island, and yet the whole country was plunged into darkness a day or two after the storm moved through. And if that's true, they still don't have it now. That's just crazy.
It's really interesting information, because that's, well, well, at least at me, I don't expect something like that. I mean, Ian, made landfall in the western tip part of Cuba, and yeah, it was an intense hurricane, but the whole system getting out is really weird to see.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, it was a really intense hurricane when it made landfall, the strongest since Gustav. But I don't think even when that happened in 2008, they had this like issue that they are now having today.
It must have
Now,
happened
almost a
during
week.
Irma, though, right?
Yeah, I think so, because Irma was a Cat 5, and practically it covered the whole island and stayed there for like 2 or 3 days. It stalled over Cuba.
Let's go back to the latest National Hurricane Center forecast for Orlene. We'll be here until the next update at 3 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, which is the time zone they're using right now, because where is it? Manzanillo, is it? Or Mazatlan? I get confused between the two. Mazatlan is in the Mountain Daylight Time zone, isn't it? And areas east are in the Central Time zone. So they're using Mountain Time because the landfall area is in Mountain Time. And as of the advisory, they're expecting it to reach a high-end Category 1 status at 90 miles per hour. And by Monday morning, it will be moving over the Islas Marias, which is a small island chain off the coast of Mexico with a small-ish population on only one of the islands, Isla Maria Madre, which is around 2,500. There's also some other islands there, smaller ones that are unpopulated, I think. Certainly can't see any sign of civilization on those islands. But they're in a hurricane warning. A tropical storm warning in that blue area marked there, and the yellow zone there being the tropical storm watch, and of course that pink zone being the hurricane watch. And they are watching to see whether the storm might weaken prior to landfall, because there is a suggestion that that's going to happen. Let me just see if I can find out what's going to cause that. I assume it would be something like wind shear or maybe dry air, but let's just check their discussion. So I'll just read all of this out. Conventional satellite imagery and a recent SSMIS overpass indicate that Orlene is becoming better organized, with the central convection becoming more symmetric and starting to develop into an eye wall, as we touched on not long ago. There have also been hints of an eye on infrared imagery, which has become a lot more clearer now on the visible. Satellite intensity estimates at 12Z were in the 55 to 65 knot range, and since that time, estimates from the SIMS Dvorak technique increased to over 70 knots. Based on this data, Orlene was upgraded to a hurricane, and this was at 9 a.m. by the way, with initial intensity of 65 knots. Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter aircraft is heading there right now. So Orlene should be in a moist and light shear environment for about the next 24 hours, and with the increased core organisation steady to rapid intensification is expected, actually, they're saying. So I guess we can't rule out Category 2. The new intensity forecast calls for a peak intensity of 80 knots, 90 miles per hour in about 24 hours. After that, strong southwesterly shear should cause steady to rapid weakening until landfall in Mexico. This should be followed by dissipation over the mountains of northwestern Mexico between 72 and 96 hours. While it can't be ruled out that Orlene could reach mainland Mexico as a hurricane, the chances of that have decreased since yesterday based on the current trends in guidance. The new intensity forecast has some adjustments from the previous forecast and lies near or at the upper edge of the intensity guidance. Orlene continues moving slowly northward at 360 degrees, 4 knots to the west of a mid-level ridge. After about 12 hours, the cyclone should turn north-northeastward in the flow between this ridge and an upper-level trough seen in water vapor imagery over northwestern Mexico and the northern Baja California peninsula. This north-northeastward motion is forecast to continue until Orlene dissipates over mainland Mexico. The track guidance is fairly tightly clustered around this track, although the GFS is a bit to the right of the other models. The new forecast track is closer to the various consensus models, just a little to the left of the previous forecast. So the next update from them will be at 3 p.m. Mountain Time, and that's when we'll have a new forecast and possibly information from the Recon plane. Until then, we'll continue to watch the storm and its live views from satellite. Unfortunately, we don't really have radar, which is usually more rapidly updating than satellite. Although this is the mesoscale imagery, but I guess you can see more on radar than you can from satellite. But there we have it. Crossing back over to the live shot from Puerto Vallarta, which is, let me just get a distance estimate from this location, and I would imagine it's not that far away from the storm, but currently from the eye, Puerto Vallarta is around 385 kilometers away, and the storm is currently moving at about 7 or 8 kilometers per hour. So starting to get a little bit cloudier in the distance as the first proper outer bands of the storm start to arrive here on this coastal resort city, I think you might want to call it, Cesar, on the western coast of Mexico.
Yeah, I do believe so. It's practically calm by the look of the imagery that you are showing us, but there are some rain bands that actually are in the distance, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
So possibly they are going to arrive possibly in the next hour or something like that, and the actual to the actual beach and the mainly coastal line of the Puerto Vallarta. Possibly thunderstorm activity or a lot of rain associated with the outflow of Orlene, of course. But right now it looks really calm. Actually, I'm kind of like not surprised, but confused, I must say.
There's a comment there. Does Hurricane Orlene have embedded lightning in the storm? Well, we can look at our lightning returns here, and well, there was only one flash, as you could see there in the inner core. So no, there is very little lightning in this storm, just one flash depicted from satellites, and I think three flashes in the eastern band there. So very little lightning in this storm detected by satellites, at least at this time.
Which also says that it's not like a rapidly intensifying cyclone yet. But
in its immediate environment on the western side, there's quite a bit of dry air over there. So it's, I guess, relying on, well, I don't know really, because there's a bit of dry air on the eastern side as well, but it's holding its own. It's got a decent area around itself, and I think that intensification phase will continue here. So this is a hurricane that's headed for the coast of Mexico. Hurricane warning in effect for the Islas Marias, and it is approaching the coast of mainland Mexico, where tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches are in effect. Of course, we're sort of still halfway between coverage on Ian and Orlene. Of course, Ian is pretty much out of the picture now, although its legacy will probably live on for a long time here. And here's a video of what happened, one view from during the storm, with boats there being swept out, literally just going out there altogether. across one of these roadways during the hurricane. That's just another shot of how crazy the scene was in Fort Myers during Hurricane Ian a few days ago. We're seeing pictures like this more and more with this storm as imagery comes out, sometimes days after the storm actually happened. Of course, conditions are still very poor near the landfall area. Here's another shot of boats en masse being thrown up against this corner of coastline. I don't know where this is. I think this might again be in Fort Myers, but you can see here a boat graveyard being tossed up against the coastline there like toys during the storm's passage. So just another viewpoint there. Lots of property damage, I imagine, will have occurred from Hurricane Ian. But now we're looking back at Orlene once again. But whilst we keep looking at that, I just want to see if I can check any more information about power outages and how that might have changed since recent days. So, as a matter of fact, it's North Carolina that's struggling a lot at the moment. Of course, Florida is as well, but from the more recent landfall of Ian, it's North Carolina that is getting a lot of power outages right now. It is currently, there are 170,000 customers out there, which is quite a lot. Moore County is the worst affected, with 25% out. Guilford County, there's around 15% out there. In Stokes County, it's around 15%. In Robeson County, it's around 10%. And in Orange County, it is about 12 or 13%. I'm trying to figure out which county Tim is in, one of our broadcasters, who I'm sure you saw in recent days. As far as I can tell, there's probably not very many power outages where he is, so I think he may well join us later on. But in Florida, there are still 1.1 million, or nearly 1.2 million, without power. Some of the worst affected places still looking really bad in terms of power outages, such as Hardee County. Even though it's a smallish county with a population of only 9,500, at least that we can see with the power outage index, but out of that, there is still about 85% out, although yesterday it was still 99%, so I suppose that's an improvement. In Charlotte County, there are still 75% out of power there, and in Lee County, it's still around 65%, so still looking very bad, hammered those areas. In Highlands County, it's still around 50%. In Collier County, it is still around 45%. In Hendry, it is around 30%. In Sarasota, it's around 50% still. And in DeSoto County, 50%. Manatee, around 25%. And up in Volusia County, it is still around 30 to 35% out of power there. And in Seminole County, we're looking at around 20% power outages there too. In South Carolina, there are still a few areas that are out of power, but overall most areas have been restored. Only about, I think, just trying to figure this out, I think only 1% are still without power across South Carolina. And the worst places are Marion County, which is at about 10% out, and Georgetown, which is also 10% out. In Virginia also has been quite affected in some areas, particularly in the south. Carroll County is 50% out right now, and Patrick County is at around 35% out, and in Bedford County, that area at the moment is around 10% out, and Danville County is at around 10 or 15% out as well, and Pittsylvania County is at around 5%, is it, or 8% out roughly. So Virginia getting a little bit of a hit as well. It has a total of 52,000 power outages. So the storm still packing a bit of a punch even up there. Ian is rated at around 35 mile per hour winds at this point, so it weakened from storm status some time ago. In fact, it's gone down quite a bit more since then. It is down to 25 miles per hour. The Weather Prediction Center are still issuing advisories on it. And I'll just read out that information for those who are interested about Ian still. Flood watches are in effect across southwest Virginia and southern West Virginia. It was near 36.4 north, 79.9 west, moving north-northeast near 10 miles per hour. And the motion is expected to continue today with a gradual turn to the southeast tonight. Maximum sustained winds 25 with higher gusts. A gradual weakening trend is forecast through Sunday. Central pressure of 1006. Ian is expected to produce an additional 1 to 3 inches of rainfall, with locally heavier amounts possible across portions of the central Appalachians and the mid-Atlantic. Major to record river flooding will continue across central Florida through next week. Limited flash urban and small stream flooding is possible across the central Appalachians and portions of the mid-Atlantic this weekend. Well, they still expect that the storm will not dissipate until the 36-hour mark, so that's something to watch out for with the remnants of Ian. But back to our main subject. But I guess there's still two main subjects really, but Orlene is the active storm right now, a hurricane, another hurricane onto the list in the Eastern Pacific, a season so far over there that wasn't expected to produce much and has ended up producing quite a bit more than what some people bargained for. It's the 16th numbered tropical cyclone of the year, and I think Olene would make it, the 15th named storm. So we've had quite a lot of storms in the Eastern Pacific and a few hurricanes as well, which is against what people were thinking when we entered this season with a strong La Nina and a Modoki La Nina at points. But it is, at one point, it was blowing the Atlantic away in terms of activity. The Atlantic has caught up quite a bit, but the Eastpac is still a little bit out and ahead. Anyway, we'll take your questions shortly, but first let's introduce David Tones, who is back on the air once again, live from our worldwide team in Australia. Hello, David.
Good evening, Nathan and Chad or Cesar over there in Mexico, and it's going to be months before people will get back to some normality with their lives due to Ian. And Florida, Nathan, has 1,192,882 customers without power. And looking at the power outages in the Carolinas, Duke Energy being the provider, there's about 589 customers within HIM's HQ area. In the North Carolina, so 589, and near the local airport, there's 3. But we'll just have to wait for Tim possibly to come on here later. But Nathan, away from the Ian, I'm going to highlight, and I did this during our streams, live events, a storm surge. I've just picked up on a news item that due to storm surge, Amtrak has suspended the entire operation on their line San Diego, Los Angeles service due to shifting ground. Metrolink and Amtrak have suspended train service linking San Diego to Los Angeles along with the rest of the US because ground underneath a stretch of seaside track in Southern California has shifted, according to officials. And this is being reported in the San Diego Union Tribune. and it was associated with Storm K.
Right. Yeah, when it went through, and well, the remnants of it were pretty close to affecting. Well, I think they did actually affect parts of California, Southern California there. So, and that's only just happened, and it's been a little while since we had Hurricane K.
Yes, so the rail services, and I posted a image from the paper in our live output room. So I just cited that tracks and parts of the 351-mile rail corridor. So the storm surge has shifted the track because it's basically on the beach's edge, but it just proves that storm surge kills. But this is a major news item that I've just picked up, and I thought I'd bring it to your attention. The Orange County Transportation Authority, which owns the tracks, plan to hold a special meeting Monday to discuss potential solutions.
Yeah, they'll be struggling with that.
And the emergency plan will likely involve driving large ground anchors into the bottom of the slope next to the track to prevent movement. So this is one that I'll be keeping an eye out, because a major disruption, I don't know what the passenger volume would be, but this is a major development due to ex-hurricane or tropical storm K. Did it reach hurricane status?
Yeah, K was quite a strong hurricane at one point, gradually weakened as it approached the Baja California Peninsula and on towards the southwestern United States as a remnant low.
The power of nature, Nathan.
It was the first credible threat to Southern California, to be honest, since I don't know, a while. I think it was a storm in the late 70s that affected Southern California. But yeah, they don't often get very many. And Lester in 1992 was one that affected areas quite well as well. Further east, though, that was more in Arizona. Random says Nora of 97. That might also be one or two, yes.
But this just highlights what can happen. But you don't hear of this. But when you've got a rail line on virtually on the beach, but the power cyclones, hurricanes, tropical storms, and we only have to look at what Ian's doing, re-power outages. But I am impressed with the power workers that are really doing a fantastic job in bringing supply back to customers.
Yeah, well, at the worst, it was, I think, 2.3 million that were out of power in Florida, and now it's gone down to 1.2. Yes. So that's halfway there, but I imagine the second half will be much more difficult than the first half.
Now we've got this, what is it, tropical storm Orlene?
Hurricane Orlene, and that is the main thing that we are covering right now. Now that you've finally got round to Orlene here, 75 mile per hour winds and a pressure of 989 millibars. And just one or two comments that we'll take in here. Adams says, do you think there'll be more storms in the Atlantic during October? I definitely think so. One will form in a couple of days near the Cape Verde Islands, actually, and we might get maybe two more approaching the Caribbean in the next week or two. And would Orlene absorb the Invest next to it? Well, we've been talking about that. The Invest has a little chance of its own. I don't think Orlene will absorb it, though. I think they're just, I don't know, they're a little bit too far apart. And the models are certainly projecting the Invest to follow Orlene into the Mexican area. We'll take a look at models soon regarding that, as we look at both of these systems right now. The remnants of Ian still active, but obviously very weak now, thankfully. but still are producing flood watches in some areas. And Hurricane Orlene gradually intensifying and is getting a little bit stronger. Became a hurricane at 9 a.m. local time. That's Mountain Daylight Time in this area. And now as we approach 1 o'clock, is still there. But we believe that Recon are in the storm, and I think they're getting lower pressures, but we'll try and corroborate that fairly soon. So Orlene, a potential threat, a significant threat to the coast of Mexico. Hurricane warnings for the Islas Marias, and hurricane watches further north, and tropical storm warnings further south, including in Puerto Vallarta, which we had that webcam on earlier. We'll cross back to that in a moment. But we're going to take a short break now, and we're back in a few minutes with more discussion on Hurricane Orlene and the aftermath of Hurricane Ian. Live coverage will continue in a moment. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. This is Force 13 Live. We are currently tracking Hurricane Orlene, which is an eastern Pacific threat to the western coast of Mexico. Hurricane warning in effect for Islas Marias, and hurricane watches in effect further north, as well as tropical storm watches in effect, tropical storm warnings, from Playa Perula to San Blas, which includes Puerto Vallarta. We had a camera there not so long ago, and there looks like they're under one of the bands of the storm right now, or at least one of the preliminary bands. But this storm could be a hurricane threat, expected to strengthen. National Hurricane Center haven't ruled out rapid strengthening even in the next 24 hours before the storm starts to succumb to higher wind shear as it draws nearer to land and then starts to weaken again. It could weaken so much that it may not be a hurricane by the time it makes its final landfall over Mexico, depending on its exact track. If it keeps going northwards towards the coast of that next province further up, which I think is Sinaloa, not Sonora. Sonora's further north. I get confused between those two. Sinaloa, if it ends up towards Mazatlan, then maybe we could be looking at the storm weakening quite a bit more before it makes landfall. Nonetheless, a hurricane watch is in effect all the way up there. And if the storm makes landfall a bit further south in Nayarit, then we may get to see a hurricane landfall. And obviously we wouldn't want that. But the biggest threat right now is for those small islands off the coast. They're fairly low populations, but they are populated, the Islas Marias, and that's an area that we could see a significant hurricane impact. On the right hand side, you can also make out the remnants of Ian that are still going and still rotating, and there's a center of circulation there that you can still quite clearly make out approaching the border between North Carolina and Virginia. And so many videos that we've seen in recent days of the storm's impacts. There was another one from, I think, Lee County this morning, and we'll play this for you now as well. This is how it looked once again in this area, and as you can see, some buildings, there was a house on fire there, and the response that's going on over there in parts of Florida right now. So the response effort, I imagine, is going to be absolutely enormous, and the damage, of course, is also pretty extraordinary. Back to this live imagery, or nearly live imagery, of Hurricane Orlene on Force 13 Live. Let's switch back to the visible view because I think we can appreciate it more, and we might be able to spot any changes with its eye and maybe coming out a little bit more. Not really, but when we look straight into its eye there on the northern side, looks like another burst of convection beginning on the northern side of Hurricane Orlene. So it does look like it's making a little bit of progress here, and Recon are in the storm, and I believe they're getting pressures in the high 970s. So that would be a substantial upgrade in terms of its pressure if that was true, or even if it was anywhere near that value, lower 980s even. We could be looking at an upgrade. My name is Nathan Foy, here in the studio once again for another hour of coverage. We're here for 3 hours today. We're into our second hour now, and that takes us nicely through till the 3 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center. That is in Mountain Daylight Time. That's the time zone that we're using today because the storm is currently in that time zone, and so is the landfall area if the National Hurricane Center's cone is right. And there is that cone showing that hurricane strength storm to continue northwards and then gradually turn eastwards. or northeastwards. I'm also joined by my team this hour. We've got David and Marlene with us. Cesar's gone for a little break. In fact, he's driving home, he told us just a moment ago. So we'll get him from his residence probably towards the end of this hour. Marlene, what are your thoughts on Orlene as we look at it this hour? Similar names, actually.
Funny on that one. But no, it's looking really good, but I think it's going to be probably easily an upgrade to probably 90. But I think that's going to be its peak.
That's what the National Hurricane
I'm
Center...
hoping.
Yeah, of course. That's what the National Hurricane Center are expecting, that 90 mile per hour peak. But they, once again, they didn't rule out rapid intensification. So I guess that's just something we're just always conscious about. Especially given that rapid intensification is notoriously hard to predict. David, your thoughts?
Looking good.
It is looking quite good.
And considering my location to the Northern Hemisphere, I won't be surprised that if anything major happens again, like what we've seen this hurricane season, people need to be prepared, and Orlene is looking very good, as I have said, and I wouldn't be surprised if the NHC upgraded it a little bit further. And Nathan, I'm monitoring the International Space Station.
Oh.
I think it's going to be close.
They on their way?
Yeah, they're tracking up over the Pacific. I don't know. I think the last track might have been a little bit closer, but
oh no, they're gonna miss.
They're going to miss.
Yeah.
But the National Hurricane Center, what peak are they indicating? Is that information available?
Yeah, I just said a moment ago there that they're expecting a 90 mile per hour peak, but they haven't ruled out rapid intensification, which would probably bring it above that.
If we do see Orlene undergoing that process, how many have we seen this season? Even in including the Westpac.
We've seen a few. I mean, unfortunately, these two big ones that we've seen recently, they've just had rapid intensification at unfortunate times. Lots of storms do it well away from land. Some of them do it as they approach land, I'm afraid.
And Nathan, just taking this a little bit further, I'm very, very concerned as the Southern Hemisphere is heading towards its cyclone season, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few surprises. The Australian Bureau of Meteorology, Nathan, is very concerned. We've got the free climate drivers that are in overdrive, and the Northern Territory, the Northern Territory wet season has started.
Right.
And we're also keeping an eye on that area of interest over there in the southwest Indian Ocean. And the Bureau has it dropping in millibars. But I am, as I said, very concerned at what we could see down here. And again, I'm going to say people need to be prepared, have food supplies, and the hurricane season, Nathan, it could go through till Oh, how late in this year?
Which one? The East Pack usually
Northern
ends a
Hemisphere.
little bit earlier. East Pack usually shuts
Yep.
down end of October. Sometimes you can get a November storm. Atlantic usually finishes up in November, but you can still sometimes get December storms as well. But obviously, we are past the peak of the season. We get what people call a second peak in October when you look at the climatology charts, and then in around the beginning to middle of October, and then it drops again towards its final dwindling. So you generally see storm numbers start to decrease when we get this point forward.
Hopefully we might, well, Florida, it's just, well, it's ground zero, and at least there's nothing else on the radar. I'm not sure.
Not
if
at the
there's
moment,
anything-
but we will check models in a little while and show everyone what's on the cards. But there's a comment or two there. Grenadine's Des says, will Ian surpass $100 billion in damages? I mean, it's a tough question. There's a lot of high value property in the area that Ian hit very hard. So I don't know. We have to make our assessments on that. I would suggest that probably. I think not. But I think it will get close. I think it's going to be a very high amount. 100 billion is just an incredible amount, but I don't know. Just want to point out as well potential analogues to Orlene, and there aren't many. I would say there's only one actually, and that would be Hurricane Rosa in 1994, if anyone remembers that one. That was an October storm, formed on the 8th, died on the 15th. Took a very similar track to Orlene, although it came in from a slightly more westerly position, so the angle was a little bit more perpendicular to land. Got to Category 2 status, peaked with winds of 105 miles per hour, and made landfall just south of Mazatlan, actually, and then moved inland. And I think that Rosa was probably a worse storm than this one will be.
And tropical storm conditions begin late Sunday, and hurricane conditions possible over portions of the west central mainland Mexico. Nathan, have you had a look at the discussion to Orlene?
Yeah, we were going through that in the last hour, and we were talking about the potential. That's where they acknowledged that potential for steady or rapid intensification were their words. And then they are expecting weakening before landfall due to increasing wind shear. So we should hopefully see some weakening there. They are currently forecasting a tropical storm landfall, but they're saying that they can't rule out a hurricane landfall, obviously,
Yes.
as well. So, yeah, those are the two situations in front of us right now. Hello to everyone on the stream watching our coverage right now. If you've got any comments or questions for us, start your message with Force13 and we'll be happy to take them live on the air. Tropical Storm Olene Bronze says, how about Tropical Depression 11? Well, that one has successfully died off, but there could be another one on the way shortly. Supernova says, do you think Orlene can make a Category 2 landfall in Mexico? I don't think so, unless we see some really rapid intensification that will put it to Category 3 at least, so that it would weaken down to a 2. I don't think so. It's very unlikely. And on that note, let's now go and look at some of the models and take a look across the globe. But mainly the Atlantic and the East Pacific is what we'll look at. So those of you who are thinking about the Atlantic and the future of it, well, there is the remnants of Ian. GFS has put it down as a 1008 low at this hour. And what happens to it? Well, it's completely dissipated very soon. Another low pressure system comes in from the Bahamas and adds to that front that's half resulting from Ian's remnants. And then you can see these two systems there that are non-tropical but could still cause winds along the coast and maybe some coastal flood alerts, and they'll sweep off towards the east. Now look further south and you've got two other areas here. You've got this one, which is what NHC have marked as a likely tropical cyclone soon, and then you've got another one here, a little tropical wave that's moving towards the southern Caribbean. Let's watch what happens with them. The first one goes past the Cape Verde Islands, and then they move northwards. Then it moves northwards, sorry, and peaks as probably a tropical storm, high-end tropical storm maybe, and then shoots north and then turns westwards, and then it really dies off. So that's not a threat to land. Out of that wave, you can sort of track it moving into the Caribbean there, and you can still see it just about. And then eventually it might develop into this system down here in the southwest Caribbean, and there's another system there that might form out of some more tropical waste or something that might become a tropical storm. This is in the very long range, so I wouldn't look too much into it, but there could be two cyclones here and they could do anything, and that one there making a tropical storm landfall in Belize. So that's just one model, the GFS. Let's take a look at the ECMWF model. It doesn't go out very far at the moment, but you'll be able to see what it does with these storms. And really the answer is not very much at all. It doesn't really develop that area of interest in the eastern Atlantic. So that's the ECMWF. The CMC, of course it does, because CMC develops anything. And it also has that Caribbean system as well, but that sinks down towards a landfall in Nicaragua as another weak tropical storm, both of them quite weak. So models aren't really digging this Eastern Atlantic storm. Icon model a little bit more as well, maybe moderate tropical storm. GFS is going the highest with it, and also has that depression maybe in the southern Caribbean. This could change a lot though. And let's go to the ensembles. So what we look for here is we look for all of these little red numbers here. Those are low pressure centers and they're millibars of pressure. And you can see on the right there that little scourge of numbers. That's part of the disturbance that we're looking at. You see all the Ian ones there. And you can see even something in the southern Caribbean, but I don't think that'll become anything. So then you look for these orange zones as we go through the forecast period. That shows a high amount of consensus and a little bit there as well. So there's plenty of ensembles going for that tropical storm, and it goes all over the place. Not much certainty on that forecast. And then you get a few model ensembles developing something north of the Greater Antilles, some of them on the southern side. And when you look through there, there's quite a few ensembles that develop a significant storm for somewhere along the Central American coast. Luckily, not many of them make it around the Florida area or anywhere in the US. There's one there that takes an interesting track from Cancun all the way through to northern Cuba and the Bahamas. But overall, you know, even that is probably only 50-50 in terms of the long-range ensembles. And apparently we have a dog in the background, and also yeah, not much else there, but something to watch later on. Now then, let's go to the Eastern Pacific and look at the main event here, obviously Orlene. So the GFS model initializes Orlene around about, well, there it is at the 6-hour point, which is now a little bit before now actually. Has it at 980 and a strengthening hurricane, so it's got that pressure quite right actually. Briefly developed, it sits at 971, which could be category 2 in 24 hours, and then weakening again. And look at that rapid weakening there as it reaches the Islas Marias, and then right into Mexico, and there's barely anything left when it makes its final landfall. So that would be a great scenario if that comes true. Behind that, there's that other area of interest that we've been looking at that's already active to the southwest of the storm, and there it is moving through. Doesn't do very much. There's another little area of interest there, and there's another one here. So lots of small areas of interest. Some of them might get close to forming, but I wouldn't give them very much chance, any of them there, as we move forward through this week. We'll just quickly look at some of the other basins. The Central Pacific, those who are still waiting for Hone, it's been 3 long years since we had a storm in this basin. Nothing expected. Western Pacific, of course, it had its own big hit recently in the Philippines and in Vietnam with Typhoon Noru. We still have Tropical Storm Roki, which is a high-end TS with winds of 70 miles per hour, and that is moving well out to sea and will eventually get sucked up. But in the long term there, no, nothing on the forecast. Well, there's a tropical cyclone, a strong one, at the very end of that run, but that is way out, so really not much else to see. Let's just cut back to the East Pacific then and look at the other models, the ECMWF. It actually has that second system developing into quite a strong tropical storm and moving the other way, so I guess that would make it more possible. As for Orlene, a much more westerly track, but it really doesn't carry that pressure very well. It initializes a storm at 1002, 1003, when in fact it's probably in the low 980s or upper 970s, and then it moves northwards on the western side of the Islas Marias, and again rapid dissipation just as it makes landfall. It slows down as it does so, which helps that along, and then moves inland. So those two systems there for the ECMWF. CMC, does that develop that second system? Yes, it does. It remains out to sea as well. And what did it just have for the storm there? Yep, a similar situation to the ECMWF and the Icon model. And that also takes it further north. So NHC is on the eastern side of pretty much all of those models. But look at that Icon, there's nothing at all by the time it reaches Mexico. Although the Icon does instead form 3 other tropical depressions, which is quite odd. And none of them become tropical storms, so that would be an interesting turn of events. But that's the general look at those models right now. I think this forecast for Orlene is pretty sewn up. It's just a little question mark over how much it might strengthen in the next 24 hours. Let's see if we can take some comments and questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. Will Orlene make the same landfall as Hurricane Agatha? Well, Agatha was quite a bit further east and a little bit stronger, 110 miles per hour, I think it was.
And they're way more south.
Yeah.
Than there.
And Force 13 bot says hello, which is quite interesting, and I'm not sure whether to be concerned or not.
Oh, it's got a sense of humour.
Maybe. Let's take a look now back at the live camera from Puerto Vallarta right now, as soon as I can press the right button. There it is. That's our live viewpoint from Puerto Vallarta, looking out towards the southwest, towards the storm itself. There are storm bands approaching this area, which might produce significant rainfall amounts. But at the moment, the conditions are still looking decent at this location. The waves still, quietly, calmly lapping across the shore. And the sun is still out there, but getting much cloudier, clouding over at this location. We'll keep looking at this for a moment. Ballistes says, why does Orlene look like it has a moat? Probably it does, I think. We'll look at the infrared again shortly. And do we think the Caribbean wave can become a hurricane? I'd say there's a small chance of that. And A Moment of Lovely says hello as well. And nice of you to join us there. But if anyone does have any other questions for us, please let us know. That's what we're here for, along with actually covering this storm live. Let's show you back to some of that infrared imagery, and this is a latest look at it right now. And look at that. While you might say there's a bit of a moat on the right hand side, I don't know whether it's dry air, but the eye itself looks like it could be wrapping tightly and quite nicely there. And who knows, this might begin a bout of rapid intensification for a time. Probably won't last very long before it gets disrupted though. And looking back at the visible imagery, this is a look at it right now. looking much better on those recent frames with blow-ups of convection. It's looking, the eye is a lot more, or the convection is much more symmetrical around the center of the storm. And NHC was suggesting earlier that it could already be building an eye wall, and I reckon that is absolutely true here. And it's quite a small eye, and so it looks like to me that this storm might be on its way to strengthening substantially here.
I wonder what the microwave is showing.
No, just thinking that.
I wonder if our team have any microwave images, but I'm not seeing any that have been posted. So I'm not sure about that. They were talking a little bit about the Recon earlier, and I think they got a 979 millibar drop sonde, but they'll be they produced their update. Actually, they did go with that 979 millibars, our cyclone analyst team, and an estimated wind of 80 miles per hour on their latest update. So we'll see what the National Hurricane Center say, but indications from Recon then showing that this storm has probably deepened by another 10 millibars as it starts to approach the coast of Mexico. How might that change the forecast cone? Well, it may well mean that this storm might get to Category 2 during Sunday, but we still expect it to rapidly weaken as it approaches the mainland after it passes the Islas Marias and then towards the coast of forgotten the name of that area again. Sinaloa, near the border with Nayarit, just to the south of Mazatlan. Some more questions here then. What is Orlene's distance to Mexico City? Right, so I imagine it's quite some distance from Mexico City. Let me just check briefly. You're probably looking at around a distance of 850 kilometers, which is just over 500 miles. And is there a small chance that Hurricane Orlene becomes a Category 3? Yeah, I reckon there is a small chance of that happening. That would be pretty bad. But considering its small core tightening right now, it would probably be foolish to rule it out. Still don't think it will happen though. John Walsh says, do we think it would be possible to track cyclones or low pressure systems permanently, or do storms recycle themselves as new storms over a period of time? Well, low pressure systems get sucked away quite often by all kinds of different mannerisms. It's impossible to track a storm's energy for more than maybe 10 days after it's died. In some cases much less. Storms can get swallowed into fronts, and those fronts eventually dump their rainfall, and just the pressure just gradually dissipates the low pressure areas and it starts again somewhere else. It's a very fascinating question about where are these things always start and end, but from our perspective, storms become untraceable quite quickly usually. As we look back at the imagery from Puerto Vallarta, and I just want to bring us back to that multi-view there where we can see Orlene and the remnants of Ian at the same time. Ian's remnants still easily traceable for a little while longer yet, but in a few days it will get completely removed. And I guess we could play a little game to that effect and see if we can track how long we can track the satellite imagery and what's Ian and what's not for, if we look at the GFS forecast, right? So let's just cut it back here, and you can see this. So you can see all of this, that's all Ian right now. Let's go frame by frame and see how long we can track it for. So some of Ian's energy is getting ripped up through here, adding to this big frontal system, which you might also argue is a little bit of a part of Ian, but then it gets already very, ambiguous. This bit is definitely Ian over here over the United States. Let's watch it continue. That's still part of Ian there. And that is still part of Ian. And that is still part of Ian. And that continues along. And that's the end of the loop. But all of that cloud there getting thrown up to be part of that other front. And all that's left is a devoid low pressure circulation. If we go to the pressure maps, so that is still Ian as far as we could see on that satellite imagery. Where does it go next? Well, that little bit of low pressure splits into two, so I don't know which one you're going to call Ian then. That one looks like it's going to get consumed. This one gets consumed by this big low pressure system on the left, and the other one might have evolved into that one, or it might still be this little bit here, and that gets absorbed by that low, and so does the other one. So it becomes a massive mess there of what is what. And what happens to that low eventually? Well, it moves north of the British Isles and the Faroe Islands and off the screen. It's a mess trying to track all of that, but there we are. More questions here. Will we do an automated stream on Hurricane Orlene? I don't think we are planning one yet, but that might change. But I mean, there is the mesoscale imagery, so I guess there's nothing stopping us doing an automated stream. And A Moment of Lovely says, do we have new numbers about possible fatalities caused by Ian? I know that the number is getting up towards 50 last night. I don't know what it is at this point. I haven't really been looking at that kind of information. But we know that it is substantial. Lots of images that came in and videos from Ian and its impacts. Just going to show another one here. This is another viewpoint from Ian. Sorry that you can only see half of the screen there. But once again you can see that widespread impact. The camera moves very quickly, but you see some buildings that have been completely destroyed. A lot of them still standing. And I think this is the Fort Myers area, but I'm not sure. It could even be one of the other places. But you can see the extent of damage there from Hurricane Ian. Big problems from that storm that will take a very long time to heal from in these southwestern communities. I think that is Fort Myers Beach, but I could be wrong. Just showing the extent of damage there. Probably isn't actually, it's a smaller road I think, but clearly a significant area there that has been smashed, and you see how the debris goes into the trees there in the distance in parts with the extreme storm surge that occurred. So that's another viewpoint from Ian. That was Fort Myers Beach. Incredible views, incredible in the wrong ways there. This is Force 13 Live. Our primary focus at this point is Hurricane Orlene, but we're still looking at Ian and its aftermath, its remnants that are still active with winds of 25 miles per hour and a pressure of 1006. The Weather Prediction Center are doing updates on that, and they'll have another one at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. But back in Mountain Time, we're covering Hurricane Orlene, and the National Hurricane Center will issue a new update at 3 p.m. A little bit cloudier at Puerto Vallarta Beach here, looking southwest. Someone standing out there, and the conditions still very calm. And that goes to show, I suppose, that this storm is pretty small. It's about, how far was it from land still? It's about 350 kilometers from here. And still very calm. I imagine the pressure is dropping slightly, and things will start to change quite a bit more later on tonight. Let's see if we can have some more questions here. So Ian made 3 landfalls, high chance of retirement. That was a comment, I think, rather than a question. Grenadine's Des says that Ian has killed 59 people and $47 billion in insurance loss. Will it continue to rise? Well, I can't confirm whether those are correct numbers, but it wouldn't surprise me if those were the actual numbers, and I imagine it will rise. Supernova says, was Ian an especially large hurricane? What was the cause for such massive storm surge? Slow movement and the extremely high winds piling up waves? Question mark. For the Florida storm surge, yes. The slowing down wasn't great for it, but the winds piling up those waves over those vulnerable areas, very dangerous. And just its strength and it's quite low pressure as well. Just had everything. Do we think Ian comes back as a considerable strong storm? As in now? Absolutely not. And Brian says, do you think that Orlene will head into the Gulf of Mexico? No chance of that, I'm happy to say. Sometimes on rare occasions you do see remnants of East Pacific storms arrive in the Gulf, but this is one that definitely will not. I don't think it'll even make it halfway across Mexico. So, Hurricane Orlene, a Category 1 with 75 mile per hour winds, headed towards land. Let's read out the latest warnings again. A hurricane warning for Las Islas Marias. Tropical storm warning for the coast of mainland Mexico from Playa Perula to San Blas. Hurricane watch for the coast of mainland Mexico from San Blas to Bahia Tempehuaya. And tropical storm watch for Manzanillo to Playa Perula. It is a small tropical cyclone with hurricane force winds extending outwards only 10 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds extending outwards up to 45 miles. Looks like someone's chilling there with an umbrella in the tropical storm warning zone here, which, you know, not the cleverest thing ever, I don't think, but oh no, they're going again. No, they're not, they just sat down. Well,
No,
you know,
they're leaving.
it's calm at the moment, but things will change there soon, and maybe quickly when the storm draws nearer, so be on your guard. That's all I can say really about that. There's a look at the storm on the latest satellite imagery, and it does look like it's rotating a lot better. Cloud tops blowing up, and I do believe that this could be the onset of some rapid intensification the more I look at this. Let's check back with the mesoscale imagery, and that's showing that it's improving a little. Not as much as it might suggest on visible, but it is looking pretty good. And from what we saw on Recon, possibly 10 millibars stronger than current. Let's just tell you about the hazards. Hurricane conditions are expected in Las Islas Marias Sunday night, with tropical storm conditions possible by late Sunday. Tropical storm conditions are expected in the tropical storm warning area by early Sunday. Hurricane conditions are expected, along the coast of mainland Mexico within the hurricane watch by Sunday night into Monday. Tropical storm conditions are possible along the coast of mainland Mexico within the tropical storm watch area tonight and Sunday. Into Monday evening, Orlene is expected to produce 3 to 5 inches of rainfall, with local amounts to 10 inches for portions of southwest Mexico. These rainfall amounts should lead to flash flooding, as well as possible landslides in areas of rugged terrain. Coastal flooding is likely along the coast of Mexico and the warning area in regions of onshore winds, and large swells generated by Orlene will affect the coast of southwestern Mexico and the extreme southern portion of the Baja California Peninsula through the weekend. These swells are likely to cause life-threatening surge and rip current conditions. Please consult products from your local weather office. And the next update from National Hurricane Center will arrive at 3 p.m. Mountain Time, which is just over an hour from now. And at that point, we will see a new cone from this update and a new forecast potentially, and we'll see if they might up those numbers a bit. So just a position reminder there, 17.8 north, 107 degrees west, 200 miles from Cabo Corrientes.
Nathan, the International Space Station.
What are they up to?
We may.
I really don't think
So-
so. But we'll have a look anyway, and we'll see what we can find from the International Space Station. We enjoy looking at their imagery as they go over the storms, but they're not going to get this one. There's the view from the International Space Station right now. We want to look towards the right hand side over there, where we might see the edge of the storm, but I really don't think so. Soon you'll probably see the Baja California Peninsula. I think that actually might be it coming up now on the screen. And the storm would be off to the right hand side. If they pan the camera, they would be able to see Orlene, but I doubt they will do that, and I think there'll be other objects from the space station blocking the view. But that's the view from the ISS as it moves up towards the Baja California Peninsula and Mexico itself, where looks like there's a lot of cloud cover, or at least thick looking clouds. They're over part of the coastline or inland. But yeah, that's definitely the Baja California Peninsula coming up, and the Gulf of California and the rest of Mexico. In fact, I think that's even the northern end of the Baja California Peninsula, so far away from Orlene, unfortunately.
No, tomorrow we might have a better chance, depending on...
Possibly. So there we are.
Clear.
It's still lovely imagery to look at, but it's
Yes.
not what we really wanted to see regarding the storm. It would be well off to the right hand side. They'd be able to see it near the edge of the earth, but this camera, it does move actually, this camera, but I think there's other objects on the right hand side that would block the view anyway. So we'll stick to our satellite imagery. That was the International Space Station passing over the northern Baja California Peninsula. And we are happy to take some more questions. Juan Carlos says there is a chance that Orlene will get stronger than Derby, ? How strong was Derby in the end? I need a reminder of how strong these storms were. I remember Derby was I think it was a pretty strong storm.
I think Derby was a top 4 at peak.
I'm thinking that as well. It won't do that. Yeah, 140 miles an hour was the peak. No, it won't get anywhere near as strong as Derby. But we could look at maybe a category 2. But right now, looking very good on satellite imagery, with this eye starting to look a little bit better. Certainly a lot of convection blowing up around it, and a few hot towers there in the last frames. The eye isn't becoming particularly clearer though yet, so I would hold off on saying that we're seeing rapid intensification, but I think we are seeing intensification of a kind. Certainly from what we heard from Recon earlier, I believe they got down to 979 millibars. That's what our analyst team went with behind the scenes. That they went with 80 miles per hour and 979 millibars at their last update. And Marlene, in fact, you sent in a little while ago a picture from the Recon flight, so let's see if we can get this up and dissect that image. There it is. So that's when they got the 979 in the center, and you can see there a very small wind field is what comes to mind when I first look at that imagery. Western side very much so, but eastern side as well. And what that means is that storms with smaller influences and wind fields can often intensify much more quickly. But they are also more vulnerable to changes, and they can weaken extremely quickly as well, these small storms. So they can often be very difficult to gauge, very unpredictable. Sometimes these ones can explosively intensify, and oftentimes they can rapidly weaken as well, as I said. So this could be a dangerous...
Hopefully it doesn't intensify as bad as Noru did.
No.
That was insane.
Well, completely different profiles in terms of what conditions we're looking at. Thankfully this year the Eastern Pacific has very low oceanic heat content, and temperatures in this area are probably only just enough, or maybe a little bit more than that, but I would imagine that we wouldn't see explosive intensification, even, anything nowhere near anything like Patricia's intensification from an Eastern Pacific perspective. No, we're looking at something like a moderate intensification phase probably, as this storm gradually intensifies. Looking back there, and this is once again the view from Puerto Vallarta, looking out and looking along the coast there as well. Still decent conditions. In fact, some people are venturing out to sea there. I wouldn't endorse that. This area is under a tropical storm warning right now, and it does look calm, but that will change potentially very quickly. We saw that storm's very small wind profile, that things could change without warning. Let's just check the cloud coverage on approach to Puerto Vallarta as well. Here's a look at this area, and that city, of course, Puerto Vallarta, is somewhere around here. And you can see they're getting quite a bit more cloud this afternoon, and probably only another hour or two before it gets some of the more major clouds there up to that line pushing through here, and getting potentially some heavy rainfall, some squally conditions perhaps, and maybe tropical storm force gusts. But I'm not going to pretend that this is a storm with a large wind field, because it's not. From what we were looking at before, the wind field probably only extends out to there or something like that, and the hurricane wind field is tiny, probably only out to here. So very small wind fields with this storm, but that could make it more dangerous and prone to rapid intensification. This is Force 13 Live, joint coverage mainly, but mostly coverage on Hurricane Orlene right now, but we are still covering with one eye the aftermath of Hurricane Ian, and a chance that Ian's still producing some flood watches over parts of where is it again, the western part of Virginia and southern parts of West Virginia. Those states, they're still under potential flood concerns as we look at both of these systems side by side once again. Obviously, I think it's I'm losing track of time, but 3 days now since the landfall of Ian in southwestern Florida, and extremely terrible conditions that have been seen in those areas. Let's just roll film on some of these again and show you what this area has looked like since the storm. Here is a view of mainly mobile homes, but these are people too. These are people's dwellings. These are where communities have started from in some of these areas in the Fort Myers region, and extreme damage there, quite visible in that zone. And here's another view on Fort Myers, looking at the real intense damage that has occurred in those areas, even those larger buildings with substantial damage on the roof there and along the sides. And there's towards Fort Myers Pier, which is a skeleton of what it was. There is nothing left there. And those buildings near the pier, which had been absolutely rammed. And you'll also notice here lots of recovery vehicles on the picture as well. Lots of vehicles and people down there who have been assisting the recovery effort in the last couple of days since the hurricane blew through. So very sobering images from this region. And there's one or two close-ups looking at some really severe damage. And there's some more areas. I think those once again are mobile homes, but completely shifted and off towards inland, being carried along by that incredible storm surge, which may have received up to 18 feet in some of these areas. So incredible footage there. And we'll show you some more in the time that we've got up until the end of this hour, because there's not much else to talk about just now. But let's show you once again another view of Fort Myers. This whole area, you can only see it on half of the screen. Apologies for that, but again, these buildings will fly past, and some of them really decimated mobile home area there, and the surge pushed it all well inland through trees, and really disastrous consequences for these suburban areas. Even some of these more permanent houses there, a lot of them completely razed from their foundations and destroyed, and some bigger lots there that were destroyed as well. Storm surge doing a complete number on this area. Interesting to see though that some of the ocean facing homes there that were still survived, quite a lot there, around 50-50 I would say, which to be honest is quite impressive considering this area was absolutely battered by potentially 18 feet of surge. And just
Nathan?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just reading a international report on the aftermath of Ian. What's the current death toll?
I don't really know. It must be somewhere around 50.
Channel 9 News, one of our major networks over here, is reporting that 90% of the island has been completely wiped out.
Which island?
Florida, 90%.
Florida's not an island. Which island?
Oh, sorry, 65 is the figure.
Oh.
First responders have recognised that there are bodies in the region, and have acknowledged that people or bodies under the debris. But it is so graphic, and 60, I think the one company that does assessment, about 65 billion.
Could be.
I think it's Sanibel Island that's been
Sanibel.
cut off.
Yeah. It would make sense if it was that one.
Karen Clark and Company, 63 US billion, or US 63 billion, but
could be. I don't know. We'll find out more about that over time, I would imagine. But incredible damage that was seen in Florida, and let's not forget the South Carolina also got quite a bit of storm surge there, particularly Pawleys Island, I think it was. And that area got quite some storm surge up there as well the other day. Ian continuing northeastward now though as a weak remnant low with winds of 25 miles per hour, pressure 1006, and Hurricane Orlene strengthening it would seem as it heads northwards, with Recon suggesting a pressure of 979 in the last hour. I don't know if they're still flying around the storm. If they are, we might get some more observations ahead of the next advisory, which will occur in an hour. The 3 p.m. advisory will update the latest intensity of the storm, the cone, and anything else you'll need to know about Hurricane Orlene if you are in the western part of Mexico or have interests there. Hopefully we'll have our Mexican correspondent Cesar Gamez back in the next hour to discuss more about what's going on locally. But in the meantime, we're going to take a short break here. Stay tuned. We'll have a lot more to cover in the next hour, including that National Hurricane Center update. And it'll be interesting to see if they might forecast more rapid intensification for Orlene, because it does look like that something like that might be starting now, with the Recon getting 10 millibars lower than we thought, and perhaps some rapid intensification taking place already. I'm sure the picture will become clearer in the next hour as we continue our coverage. But right now, Orlene is 75 miles per hour, 989 millibars, with hurricane warnings out in effect for Las Islas Marias. Back in a moment. Live coverage will continue in a moment. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. This is Force 13 Live, our third hour of coverage today, and our final one. We are covering Hurricane Orlene, with a little bit of commentary on the aftermath of Hurricane Ian, of course. The influence of it is still extremely broad and rotating still in North Carolina, but still winding down, just about to cross the border into Virginia. There's a few flood watches out there, but nothing major at this point anymore, thankfully. And we have hurricane warnings out in parts of Mexico ahead of Hurricane Orlene. As a matter of fact, just to clear up some news here, all of the flood watches that were in effect in Western Virginia and southern West Virginia have been discontinued. So there are no inland flood warnings or watches anymore, so that's really good news, and that is from Ian. But there are still coastal flood warnings and advisories for most of Chesapeake Bay, all the way down to Virginia Beach, still under a coastal flood advisory, and I heard things got pretty gnarly there yesterday as well. But our main focus is still Orlene. We got one or two passes from Recon recently that got a 979 millibar pass. So that looks like it's going to be what the National Hurricane Center might go with at their advisory at the end of the hour at 3 p.m. As soon as we get that, we'll bring it to you live, whatever they run with, and any further information. Right now, though, just to reel off those watches and warnings again, a hurricane warning in effect for Las Islas Marias, a tropical storm warning for the coast of mainland Mexico from Playa Perula to San Blas, hurricane watch for the coast of mainland Mexico from San Blas to Bahia Tempehuaya, a tropical storm watch for the coast of mainland Mexico from Manzanillo to Playa Perula. And they are expecting into Monday evening 3 to 5 inches of rainfall, with local amounts to 10 inches for parts of southwestern Mexico. This will probably lead to flash flooding as well as possible landslides in areas of rugged terrain. Live camera here looking at Puerto Vallarta, which is underneath a tropical storm warning right now, and someone just chilling there on I think a canoe type boat there, and just jumped into the water. And I guess that shows two things. One, that some people aren't taking it so seriously right now, but two, it's extremely calm at this location, and that is because this storm is extremely small. It is 350 kilometers from this location, pretty much, the eye of the storm, but as you can see, it is very calm. The trees aren't moving at all, so I guess people could be forgiven for thinking that there's nothing going on, but there is a tropical storm warning at this location, so people shouldn't be out there, and we are expecting that the storm will start to push through tomorrow or tonight. But the outer bands of the storm still not really being felt in this area, although it has gone a little bit murkier. Certainly the sun isn't out anymore than it was earlier, and we started to see some high cloud moving over this area. It looks like we've got some medium cloud now moving over as well. The visibility is dropping a little bit, and the storm is starting to make its presence a little bit more better felt. Keep sending in your comments and questions live on the air tonight. Start your message with Force 13 all in text in the YouTube chat, and we'll be able to address those questions. Let's look back at the latest satellite imagery, and here is the visible, and once again you can see decent convection blowing up, and quite clearly an eye wall there, and an eye appearing, although it hasn't really deepened out very much yet. But with Recon getting much lower pressures, that would suggest here that we are probably looking at a storm that is possibly intensifying quite rapidly. We'll have to get an idea on how quickly it's intensifying with further recon passes possibly as the storm draws closer. But the National Hurricane Center are currently forecasting a 90 mile per hour peak, which is just short of Category 2, and it is currently a Category 1 with winds of 75. In the studio again for this other hour of coverage, my name is Nathan Foy, and it's nice to be here once again. I'm joined by my team this hour. We have David, Cesar, and Marlene. Let's first talk to Cesar, because you are in Mexico, in Guadalajara, which is in Jalisco, the same province that is also being affected by this storm in the next 24 hours. What's the latest that you've heard from your area and people's attitudes, I guess? Are they taking it seriously?
Well, the national weather in how it's called, institution or service, I don't know how to say it. Of course, they are releasing bulletins and some advisories of Orlene's proximity, and of course, intensity of the storm that is going to increase over the passing of the hours, and as well as Orlene gets closer to the western coast of Mexico. On my state or province, which is Jalisco, coastal parts are under tropical storm warnings, more due to the possibility of tropical storm conditions might occurring possibly or today or tomorrow. But it doesn't look like people are taking it too serious or aren't that concerned, to be fair. And maybe because to become a strong hurricane when it makes landfall on Mazatlan, possibly. But yeah, the weather service here in Mexico are taking taking closer observations of this hurricane, and let's see what happens. It's actually intensifying really good, or at least in the visible satellite presentation, it's looking rather good to what we saw earlier. So this
Yeah,
means that it actually is intensifying a little bit quickly.
ice still looking very shallow, but there's decent amounts of convection blowing up all around the western and southern side. Eastern side still lacking in that, so I guess it's I don't know. I mean, people were talking about this moat, and it's still quite visible there all across that southern side and eastern side, and that's still opening up a little bit. So I'm just wondering here, Cesar, whether we might have an eye wall, but a big gap in the northeastern side due to dry air.
Absolutely, it looks really dry or empty. I don't know how to say
Yeah.
it, but actually, it is a big rain to the northeastern quadrant, which is actually moving inland. Those rain bands will cause some rains possibly by overnight in the western coast of Mexico, and a part of that, particularly Orleans northeastern quadrant or the whole eastern quadrant, is looking yeah dry or with any presence of clouds actually.
And you were saying earlier
But
today, before we went on air, actually, that these areas are actually quite dry right now.
yeah, Mexico has been uh, well, I don't know which word put on that, but it has been one of the worst droughts in Mexico's history
Really?
since 2021 or since 2020. Mexico has been suffering with severe droughts, and they haven't been stopping right now. So actually, the rains or the rain or the water that Orlene will bring to the western coast of Mexico is going to be very very good welcome, as long as it's not intense, of course. um, as long as it remains a weaker storm, and that doesn't cause destruction, but practically to places in the western coast of Mexico, especially Sinaloa, the state that is actually expected to make a direct hit, has been suffering with of droughts recently.
Right.
So the passing of Orlene, it's going to be a very good welcome, uh, but hopefully it's not going to be that intense. Let's let's hope for that.
All right, and we're looking at both of these views here on Hurricane Orlene and the remnants of Ian. Marlene,
Yep,
what
I'm
was
here.
that?
Oh, nothing. Someone else was talking to me.
Oh, all right. Vapor says, "Please tell me how this monster hasn't died yet," referring to Ian. Yep, the center is still rotating in the northern part of North Carolina, just about to move into Virginia, pretty much in the next hour, the center. 25 miles an hour, pressure 1006 millibars. Weather Prediction Center will update us again at the end of the hour. Crazy. And Tropical Storm Alton Ebron says, chance of embedded tornado in Orlean.
Tornadoes?
Well, we always look at the outer areas when we're looking at possible tornadoes. I mean, look at this view right now. If you look towards the eastern band, quite mesmerizing to see how some of those clouds are moving as they progress northwards. That's where you get most of the instability. So if there are going to be any tornadoes, it's probably going to be in this band, which is slowly creeping up towards the coast. But I imagine this isn't going to be a major tornado threat today.
Well, it's really rare to see tornadoes in that,
What was that?
mainly due to the,
Looks like we're losing your
I don't
signal,
know.
Cesar.
Yeah. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, just start that again.
Oh, okay. Well, in those particular places in Mexico, seeing tornadoes aren't common. It's really weird to see tornadoes in those areas. Maybe some water spouts, but I don't know if tornadoes actually. But it can't be ruled out as well. And are the main cause of tornado outbreaks in caused by tropical cyclones. But so far, I haven't like heard news uh, about it or any warnings from the meteorological service here in Mexico about possible tornadoes forming. So I guess so far we can be relaxed. I don't know.
All right. There was another comment as well from a Juhun who says, will there be any effects to Guanajuato from Orlean?
Mm, think so. Orlene is really small, and the state of Guanajuato is like 400 kilometers away from my current position.
Isn't that where you used to be?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
lived in the city of León, Guanajuato until December of the last year, and I only remember one tropical cyclone actually moving really close to Guanajuato and came from the Gulf of Mexico. It was Franklin in 2017.
Ah, wow.
Uh, it's not. It's really mm, zero chances of
Yeah.
being affected by Orlene in Guanajuato.
Once again, looking at this view from Puerto Vallarta right now, looking out to sea, and it is starting to get just a little bit more gloomy there, particularly looking on that left-hand side. You see a few clouds moving up above those hills. So the storm's influence starting to be felt in this area. I might be speculating a bit, but it just looks like the waves getting a little bit more ripply. Having said that, certainly no winds, because those palm trees are still stock still right now, as someone looks like they're taking their dog for a walk and running about and enjoying the waves there. But this area is under a tropical storm warning and could be affected by those winds beginning overnight. Now, Puerto Vallarta, Cesar, it looks to me as though it's got a nice bay around it, and it's in a natural inlet, and so I imagine it's protected quite a bit from strong winds.
Not sure, Nathan, if actually can be protected by the strong winds. Certainly, it's a vulnerable place of tropical cyclones, but I I guess it's I guess you're right because I haven't heard like too much history of damages or disaster really
But
by
maybe
tropical
surge,
cyclones.
though, perhaps.
I guess the storm surge is the main risk, yeah, because direct hits by tropical cyclone, I haven't heard like anything with historic disasters or anything that remembers people that it's a dangerous place. To be honest, it's really it's a very touristic place, and a lot of people visit this kind of location in particular due to its the waters, the the weather, the weather in general. But I
Yep.
guess the storm surge is the main risk.
David, any news for us right now? I know that last hour I think you were reporting over 60 fatalities now from Hurricane Ian. Just wondering if you found anything else, or just to remind us on what that news was that you saw last hour.
I've got no information, Nathan, but I have no doubt that as the cleanup and search and rescue operations continue over in the Florida region, that number will increase sadly.
We've got a lot of background audio over there at Marlene's place. I don't know if you want to try and fix that there. But at this time, in Florida right now, hour by hour, it does look like the power outages are starting to be fixed in some areas. I know at the start of the stream 2 hours ago, the area that was out of power was 1.2 million. It's now fallen to 1.1 million, so it's getting closer to zero. Currently 1.13 million out of power. That still includes around 90% of Hardee County. Small county, but an area that at one point had 99% power outages. In Charlotte County, that's still around 75% out. In Lee County, we're still looking at about 70 to 75% out as well. In Highlands County, we're at about 50% out. DeSoto, about 50%. Sarasota, around 40%. Manatee is at around 30% out. Collier County is around 35% out as well. Hendry is currently only now about 20% out there. Glades County is around 15% out. Okeechobee is at around 10%. Polk at about 15%. Hillsborough at around 5%. Orange County is around nearly 10% out. Seminole County is at around 20% out, and Volusia County, that's still a big one in the northeast part of Florida, that is still 35% out, and Flagler is at about 15% out there as well. But right now, North Carolina is the worst place outside of Florida
Yes.
for power outages, with 131,000 outages, Moore County being the worst in proportion, which is about 15% out right now. Stokes County is around, just figuring this out, 15% out. Guilford County is at around 10% out. Orange County, nearly 10%, and a few other locations that are nearly 10%. In South Carolina, the outage is now only 15,000. I'm not sure where most of those are, because actually it does add up in the end. I'm just seeing quite a few here. So there's 3,000 out in Charleston County, 1,600 in Berkeley, 3,000 in Georgetown, 4,500 in Horry. And those are the main bulks of power outages there. And in Virginia, we're getting a few power outages there as well. 38,000 out there at the moment. 4,000 of them are in Patrick County, nearly 3,000 in Carroll, 3,000 in Danville, 3,000 in Pittsylvania, 3,000 in Bedford, and 1,000 in Amherst counties. So quite a few there as well. But I expect that, well, Maryland has nearly 3,000 power outages across the state there, which is a much smaller amount, but we're still seeing a few locations that are being affected up there by Ian, the remnants of Ian, once again as well. So mostly the threat has gone, but we're still seeing the odd power outage. There are no flood watches or warnings anymore, but there are coastal flood watches and warnings that are still active, mainly along Chesapeake Bay, but also for the coast of Delaware, and also for parts of coastal New Jersey as well. Some coastal flood advisories in that location.
And Nathan, I got some update from Tim on Recon. It's only made 2 passes and 979 millibars and 85 miles per hour, 75 knots. So I think we'll, two flights, probably down the northeast and southeast sector. So
is that them saying that they're finished, is it?
Yes, only
Right.
2 flights.
2 passes, yeah.
So Recon would support 85 miles per hour, 75 knot central pressure, 979, and weapon intensification possible.
Here's another view from Ian damage. It's very sad to see, but I think we should continue to show it.
Yes.
Every so often here on our stream. Another view of just the tremendous damage that has been incurred in, I think this is Fort Myers Beach once again. Probably the worst place overall that was affected, at least worst large place. I think Sanibel Island would have been the worst, and Captiva possibly. But Cape Coral and Fort Myers both getting severe impacts from this storm. That was another viewpoint, and we just want to show you different views of what happened in various points. Let's show you the first video that we got out when the impact happened from the storm, back on would it have been Thursday, I think. This is what it looked like the very morning after the storm passed through on the afternoon of Wednesday. And once again, extreme damage that was seen in the Fort Myers area. To my knowledge, this is still the only video that I've found where it has Fort Myers and Sanibel Island with it. There you can see the toll plaza up to the bridge section, the causeway that takes the road to Sanibel Island, completely washed away and extensively damaged. So just another look here at the areas that were so badly impacted by Hurricane Ian when it moved through a few days ago, and obviously the cleanup operation and the recovery effort will take a long time, probably the rest of this year into next year.
Nathan?
Yes.
I hate doing this, but breaking news, just cited a media report, the death toll from Hurricane Ian, I think we mentioned 63, is now 77.
Wow, according to whom?
Spectator Index.
Right.
So that's, but I will come back with
yeah, just see if
more.
You can get see if you get a few sources that might corroborate that. But that's an indication there that the death toll may have risen to around 77. Pretty insane numbers, to be quite honest. Usually storms that affect Florida end up not producing a massive death toll. I mean, I don't know when the last time Florida might have received a 100 death toll from any storm.
I've got more information. Apology. Florida Division of Emergency Services search and rescue update at 4 p.m. More than 1,000 people have been rescued and evacuated from flooded areas. Search and rescue efforts are ongoing. More than 1,000 people have been rescued.
And already some of those rescue effort videos have surfaced online. Unfortunately, I can't bring them to you on this stream this evening, but we might be able to see it in future. Just a graphic showing the actual video sequence of these rescuers who jump down from their helicopters and rescue these people and put them in little, almost like a basket type fixture, and then they get lifted back up into the helicopter, and a lifeline for those people that are stranded in the aftermath of the storm. Some of those places completely flooded over still, and those people being rescued probably got very little to no resources for sustenance in some of those areas. So people who really need to be rescued to save their lives, when in some of these areas help may not come for weeks. But nonetheless, our main attention tonight is still on Hurricane Orlene with 75 mile per hour winds, but we are expecting an upgrade now. What we saw from the National Hurricane Center, the Recon flight, they estimated a pressure drop of 10 millibars down to 979, and that might also coincide with a upgrade in winds to perhaps 85 miles per hour, and perhaps this storm might make a run towards Category 2 status. We'll have to see how that looks in the overnight hours tonight. We are also expecting another advisory from the Weather Prediction Center, who will give us another update on the remnants of Ian. I'm not sure how timely their updates are over there, so we may not get that update before we go off the air, but we'll get the main one from the National Hurricane Center on Orlene. And if you've just joined us or wondering where this storm is headed, there is the most recent National Hurricane Center forecast cone, which is indicating a hurricane landfall over the Islas Marias, and then a rapid weakening as it makes landfall on the border between Nayarit and, once again, I've forgotten that name, Sinaloa.
Yeah, this is the province.
Yep.
Sinaloa.
And we saw from models earlier, Cesar, a lot of those models are predicting really rapid weakening before it reaches land. So hopefully this storm does weaken a lot as it makes landfall there. I wonder if that might be because of this drought that's going on, and maybe just extensive dry air might get to this storm really quickly. NHC say wind shear, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'm actually thinking that is the wind shear the main reason of why Orlene will weaken, but actually the dry air could be could play a role in that. Well, I haven't seen the water vapor imagery of Orlene yet, but as we saw in the eastern quadrant of Orlene, it's really dry. So of course it could be as well an indicator of a rapid weakening phase, possibly by tomorrow after intensifying quickly today, and then it will start weakening and hopefully
maybe a little later
not get strong. Well,
look back at the infrared imagery again, which is where we first really noticed that potential dry air intrusion, and again it's still showing up there, and we've got this storm and the tail of the storm becoming more and more extreme, I suppose you could call it, as it starts to get continually cut off. I just wonder if the storm will fight back here, and if it it will really struggle if we see more entrainment around that northern side, which will really limit that intensification, which would obviously be a good thing. Right now, though, we are seeing gradual intensification, even when you look at satellite 2, because we're seeing those darker colours around the eye. You can quite clearly see where the eye is, sort of little orange patch now. It's slowly deepening, but round it we've got those cloud tops, those darker colours, which are starting to increase even on the northeastern side now. They're not blowing up in convection, but they're gradually bubbling upwards. And actually, when we look at latest visible images, there might actually be a flare-up starting to begin now on that northeastern side, which is the weakest. So I guess we're going to keep watching that northeastern to northern side tonight, but as we keep looking at this imagery, we're still conscious about that possible dry air moat that's stretching all around the storm, and that could really give it some trouble. Let's get some more comments here. Do we think that Ian peaked as a Category 5? If so, do you think the National Hurricane Center will upgrade it in post-analysis? Now, I've still been too busy and I've not been able to look at the raw data to make my own conclusions. I still think, from what I saw operationally, that my answer would be no. I don't know if any of you guys have any thoughts, team?
And go,
Go on,
David, go.
please. No, you go first.
Well, thank you. I don't think that Ian actually got a Category 5 status. Of course, it was really intense seen on the satellite imagery, but judging by the eye, judging by how structurally Ian looked on the satellite imageries, it's quite clear, for me at least, that it wasn't a Category 5, and the cloud tops weren't that cold for me, to be honest.
But Cesar, the thing is, people who are
is-
advocating Category 5 are really looking at the Recon data. Some people are stating that the Recon data had 1 or 2 surface wind reports of 158 miles an hour. Don't know if that's fully true yet or not. Other reports suggesting that they got 160 knot flight level winds, which would correlate to Category 5 at the surface. So that's what I believe their arguments are.
Well, that's some really good argument. So it's going to be a good fight, let's say that, about if it's going to be a Cat 4 or Cat 5. 155 and 160 miles is practically there's no difference about the
Yeah.
destruction, that the potential destruction that a hurricane could do.
This is the thing, but you have to put those category breakpoints somewhere, don't you?
I mean, I think it's a mental thing about saying that a hurricane is a Category 5, just like for the...
I'm sorry, Cesar, I've got to cut across you because the update is out from the National Hurricane Center. Orlene is up to 80 miles per hour now and a pressure of 979 millibars, so they went with the Recon estimate, and they are now predicting a Category 2 peak and then gradual weakening. I think they are now projecting a Category 1 hurricane landfall. No changes to the watches and warnings right now, but they have put it slightly stronger, 979 millibars, 80 miles per hour, and they're expecting a Category 2 peak.
Quite a bit low pressure for an 80 miles per hour hurricane.
Yeah, but backed by Recon, so that's the latest from National Hurricane Center, and already they're not slacking on this one. They've already produced their discussion update as well, so let me tell you what they're saying regarding their prognostic reasoning. Orlene has strengthened some since the last advisory. An Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter aircraft reported 700 millibar flight level winds of 80 knots in the northeastern eye wall, and reliable looking surface wind estimates of 69 to 72 knots from the SFMR. That implies there were some that weren't. The central pressure inside the 16 nautical mile wide eye was 979 millibars. Based on these data, the initial intensity is increased to a possibly conservative 70 knots, so suggesting there that it could be stronger. Data from the aircraft and a recent scatterometer overpass show that Orlene remains a small tropical cyclone. Orlene should remain in a generally moist and light shear environment for about the next 18 to 24 hours, and continued steady intensification is expected during that time. The new intensity forecast now calls for a peak intensity of 85 knots in about 24 hours, that's category 2, a slightly higher intensity than the previous forecast. After that, strong southwesterly shear should cause steady to rapid weakening until landfall in Mexico. This should be followed by dissipation over the mountains of northwestern Mexico between day 3 and 4. As mentioned previously, while it can't be ruled out that Orlene could reach mainland Mexico as a hurricane, the chances of that are decreasing based on the guidance and the forecast shear. So they are actually not forecasting a hurricane at landfall from what I gather there. The new intensity forecast again lies near or at the upper edge of the intensity guidance. Orlene is generally moving slowly northward, due north at 4 knots to the west of a mid-level ridge. After about 12 hours, the cyclone should turn north-northeastward in the flow between this ridge and upper-level trough seen in water vapor imagery over northwestern Mexico and the northern Baja California peninsula. This motion is forecast to continue until Orlene dissipates over mainland Mexico. The track guidance is fairly tightly clustered together, although the GFS remains a bit to the right of the other models after 24 hours. The guidance envelope has shifted a little westward since the previous advisory, and based on this, the new forecast track is again nudged a little to the west. However, the new track lies a little east of the various consensus models between them and the GFS. Well, in layman's terms, we're about to find out how that cone has shifted, but they are going for a slight westward shift, and there is the latest update, forecasting a hurricane to approach land, but they expect rapid weakening as it makes landfall on Monday, and I suspect that that's why they have not yet gone for a hurricane warning in Mexico, although it is getting a little bit close for comfort. Cesar, any opinions on what we've just heard?
I agree with the fact that Orlene is not going to make landfall as a hurricane based on the forecast this year and the dry air that we are seeing on the satellite imagery currently. Of course, doesn't mean that it's going to be less dangerous, but at least are some good news. So that means the people will not suffer a lot based on deteriorating conditions of Orlene by Sunday and then Monday when it makes landfall. But still, it's going to be a pretty dangerous storm for the western coast of Mexico, mainly to the states of Jalisco and Nayarit, principally, mainly due to the hurricane proximity. So the storm surge and maybe tropical storm conditions could happen in just the western tip of the coast of Mexico, as Orleans goes to the north to its closest point of those particular places.
So, for everyone's information, we won't get to update that bottom bar till the end of the hour, or, well, whilst we're on the air. We are finishing up at the end of the hour with our coverage here, but the National Hurricane Center reporting that Orlene is up to 80 miles per hour and the pressure of 979, verified by Recon. Here's a view looking out to sea right now from Puerto Vallarta. Looks to me as though the tide might be going out slightly there. I don't know what the tide times are like at this location, but they'll be getting the closest pass to the storm probably overnight, or, well, let's just check that map again. They'll be expecting the worst of the storm, not tonight at all, but tomorrow night is actually when they'll be expecting the worst conditions, although the track forecast has shifted slightly to the west. I'm not sure it has, looking at that, though. I'm not seeing much of a difference, but I guess the cone has widened a little bit, and maybe they're looking at possibly the storm going a bit further west. Certainly, computer models are taking it slightly west of the Islas Marias. NHC still going straight through, and I think so is the GFS. So I guess NHC is sticking close to the GFS right now. Let's get some more comments. Hockey says, are there any hurricanes that could hit Louisiana at all? They have not gotten any hurricanes yet this season, and I'm sure they're relieved about that. There's no signs of anything on the way yet, so that's as much as I can tell you right now. Nothing for the next 2 weeks. But once again, looking at this beach view here at Playa Punta Negra, just to the south of Puerto Vallarta, we're looking at fairly calm conditions. The waves a little bit ripply out over the water there, but still calm conditions, and you can just see from the trees there's hardly any wind blowing. It's gotten a lot duller since earlier today. The cloud cover has increased substantially, and first it was the high cirrus from the outer edges of the storm. Now it's some lower clouds that are starting to come in, and visibility decreasing on those hills on the left hand side there. So that's the latest regarding Hurricane Orlene. 80 miles per hour, pressure 979. And once again, we look at this satellite imagery where it looks like it's holding up quite well. And whilst we've not seen real deepening of the eye, the convection has been blowing up nicely all around it. But we're still intrigued about that possible moat that's all around that storm. A moat of dry air that could impact it. Who knows? Jaden says, what do we think about the GFS ensembles agreeing on a tropical system in the West Caribbean about 2 weeks from now? Well, it's not full agreement. I think it's about 50% of the ensembles are calling for that. But it is something to watch out for. So, you know, that could be something that happens there in the Western Caribbean. I'm slightly happier to see that compared to earlier ensembles, some of the earlier ones were still taking it into the Gulf and possibly to Florida again. But more recent ensembles are suggesting it will stay much further south and won't exit the Caribbean Sea. But that is way out. That is the end of next week, basically. So a very long way until we get there. I don't know what else we could look at here in the time we have left, but we're covering both situations right now still. Of course, we are watching Hurricane Orlene and what's left of Ian. Still two powerful storms there that are continuing. Ian, of course, still rotating, although it is becoming more and more broad over time. It's just about to enter Virginia from North Carolina. And obviously Hurricane Orlene, which we've been discussing at length here. From what we've heard recently in the last half hour or so, we believe that the death toll from Ian in the United States has risen to 77, which is...
Nathan.
Go ahead.
NBC and all of its affiliates are supporting that figure.
So, a pretty disastrous storm. And I don't know if all of those were in Florida. I imagine perhaps some of them might have occurred in the Carolinas. But I can't imagine, I can't remember the last time we had a storm that caused, you know, say it gets to 100 fatalities perhaps. When the last one would have been in Florida, it must have been quite a long time.
Irma?
Did Irma do that?
I think so, but not 100% sure. I can look it up.
It was actually 87 from Irma, so it was pretty close. I suppose it... Yeah, so I guess there is still some close comparisons. I didn't know it was that many in Irma, but there we have it. David, any thoughts about either storm right now?
Well, how deep or how strong is Orlene going to get? And what really concerns me is the Florida coast. Like, just can't and I'll be crying, not another hurricane.
And that's the
I'm
thing.
not speculating. That is a major concern, and it can't be ruled out.
Oh no, especially when you get to the later part of the season, Florida becomes the place really that you're most out of the United States. Florida is, well, it's most likely all season long, but it becomes even more prominent in October and November when you get these late season storms. Not to say that will happen. Usually they stay in the Caribbean if there are any at all. But yep, Florida is a vulnerable place in the late season.
And you know, Nathan, I'm also thinking about the ocean heat content, and
Still is through the roof. Yep.
Cesar was talking about his area being in flood. Well, bring the rain on, but I pick up on
in drought. Yeah.
And over here in Australia, it's the opposite. We've had too much rain. And I remember we had 3 years with no water here on the East Coast. And people need to be prepared. And we're not out of the hurricane season yet.
Oh, no.
But when you look at what has gone on this year with the weather, and another word that you've said is the Medusa effect.
Well, I mean that is really speculation, but my charge is that, well, we've had this Madoki La Nina, a La Nina of sorts that has been centered over more the Central Pacific rather than traditional Eastern Pacific, and it's the first time we've seen this pattern in a modern season, with the temperature anomaly records going back to 1984. I'm speculating that might be a big part of the reason why we've seen such odd activity this year, with a completely dormant August around the whole world, and then September coming out with these real big storms. Fiona, which was a very powerful storm, a traditional hurricane for a large part, until later on, when it became that enormous and very powerful extratropical storm for Canada. And then we had, of course, Typhoon Noru in the Philippines, a Category 5 just before landfall and weakened to a 4 when it made landfall. Gave Manila the slip ultimately. It was looking very close for that major capital city for a while, and then went into the South China Sea and made landfall in Vietnam as a weakening storm, although for a time it looked like it could have been a Category 3 on landfall. So they sort of got away with the worst on that one as well. And then of course we had Ian. So all of these storms, and of course the ones that we had earlier on that hit Japan, Hinamnor, and forgot the other one, was it Nesat? Whichever other storm it was. Damodol, that's the one. So, you know, those were powerful storms in those areas, though not really out of the ordinary, those ones, but we had some pretty crazy storms this year, and different patterns that might be due to that effect. What it really means, though, is that we're in pretty much uncharted territory. We don't really have an idea of what the rest of the year has in store for us. The best climate models have been indicating all year long that the back end of the season, which is now into November, is going to be absolutely lit up with storm activity in the Western Pacific and maybe a little bit in the Atlantic. So we're just going to have to watch out really closely on what happens.
The Peace River in Arcadia surged 10 feet higher in 2 days, soaring past a 20-foot record and reached nearly 24 feet high on Friday. The overflowing river invaded people's homes, swamping businesses, leading to high water rescues by police days after air made landfall. It is not expected to return to its normal level of around 12 feet for over a week. That's the Peace River. Tampa Times.
Jaden says, do you think the volcano in January impacted weather patterns? And my answer to you is no, because certainly in the northern hemisphere, nothing that happens in the southern hemisphere, doesn't matter how big that volcanic eruption is, it cannot pass the equator. It's how the world works, the Coriolis effect. Nothing in terms of atmosphere can move into the northern hemisphere from the southern hemisphere in terms of weather patterns and all of that. So that volcano, if it affected anything, it would only be the southern hemisphere weather. And I don't think we've seen much effects over there in the southern hemisphere either. All we've seen so far is more oddities in the form of 3 early season tropical cyclones in the southwest Indian Ocean, and possibly a 4th coming up on the forecast in the next 5 days. So something else to look at over there. All weak storms, but fascinating how they've all occurred out of the usual bounds.
And the BA has said around 1005, 1009.
We have the update from the Weather Prediction Centre for what's left of Ian. The 5 p.m. update, they have it at 36.8 north, 78.8 west, which is 95 miles west-southwest of Richmond, Virginia, 145 miles west of Norfolk, 25 miles per hour, moving east-northeast at 6, and a pressure of 1008 millibars. No watches and warnings. And not much else to say really about that one, although it could still produce an additional 1 to 3 inches of rainfall, with locally higher amounts possible across portions of West Virginia and western Maryland into Sunday morning. So we're just about to finish up here with our coverage. The news at this hour is that Hurricane Orlene has been determined to be slightly stronger by Recon planes, or that it is intensifying right now, strengthening, with winds now of 80 miles per hour and a pressure of 979 millibars. So quite a bit stronger than earlier. It is a very small storm as well, with hurricane force winds earlier only out to 10 miles. And I think it is still 10 miles, and the tropical storm force winds extending outwards up to 45 miles, which really isn't very much. Hurricane warning for Islas Marias. Tropical storm warning for the coast of mainland Mexico from Playa Perula to San Blas. A hurricane watch in effect for the coast of mainland Mexico from San Blas to Bahia Tempehuaya. A tropical storm watch for the coast of mainland Mexico from Manzanillo to Playa Perula. So the forecast track has changed slightly and slightly westwards from the National Hurricane Center, and they are expecting a Category 2 peak now. Earlier they were only expecting a Category 1 peak at 90 miles per hour. They are now expecting 100, and will definitely move inland over Mexico later on in this coming week.
Nathan?
Yeah.
I just posted something to our main Twitter account, North Carolina.
Okay, what is it?
Hurricane Ian made a South Carolina landfall 100 miles away, but it took a big bite out of the beach at Oaks Land.
Oak Island.
Oak
Yeah.
Island.
Yep, lots of beach erosion, few pictures of beach erosion there, and I imagine that will have been seen in quite a few areas there. Massive storm surge that happened when Ian moved through, and of course those crashing waves as well, tearing away at the beach areas. So there we have it. That's most of the information there. Cesar, we'll give the final word to you because you are in Mexico, somewhat close to the storm. Just give us a few words here before we finish.
Well, it's good news that, or it's not expected that Orlene is going to be intense by landfall, but surely it's intensifying quickly, and it could represent some dangerous situation for the western coast of Mexico in terms of storm surge and higher waves on the beaches. So just hopefully people are taking this serious. It's not going to be a a storm that should be ignored. So of course it's important to take all the precautions just in case. And let's see what happens tomorrow, because in my place I'm going to receive some rain bands, possibly some intense amounts of water. Depends on how much Orlene evolutions, but so far it's looking quite let's say clear. Like there's still a bit sunny with few clouds, not yet.
Do you want to say a few words in Spanish, Cesar?
Well, I actually noticed someone asking if Orlene is going to be impacting San Francisco Nayarit, which is a village in the western coast of Nayarit, on the beach. I can speak in Spanish if you want.
You've got about half a minute.
Well, bueno, toda la gente que escuchó este informe, esta transmisión en YouTube, muchas gracias y manténganse al tanto del huracán Orlene. Va a estar intensificándose todavía en lo que resta del día de hoy. Probablemente alcanzará vientos de 165 kilómetros por hora, que sería su pico de intensidad de categoría 2. Pasará en su punto más cercano el día de mañana por las costas de Nayarit y Jalisco y estará tocando tierra en Mazatlán, probablemente como una tormenta tropical débil, para que estén al tanto.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you, Cesar, and thank you, team. This was Force 13 Live. We'll be back with a tropical weather bulletin at the usual time tonight. At last, they're coming back at midnight UTC, which is 8 o'clock on the US East Coast. We'll see you there. That's all for now. I'm sure we'll be back with more live coverage on this storm tomorrow. This is Hurricane Orlene.